Hi there, Maude Barlow speaking. I think you've just seen me in a film called Blue Gold. I'm delighted to be here. Have not had the pleasure of meeting Suzanne, and hello, Suzanne. But I hear of your wonderful work, and it's a pleasure to be connected again to my old friend Pat Masters. Hello, Pat. We worked together years ago in Ottawa, and we're both still doing what Pat calls important trouble. I want to, oh gosh, that film was amazing to make and amazing to watch. There's another called For Love of Water, which was made around the same time, and they really did get out into the world and help tell this story. I want to say first off that the water issue is very much a women's issue in many, many, many places in the world, including, of course, the countries where there isn't water coming out of your tap, so the women have to walk long distances to get to the water. And they take the girls out of school, partly because they need the girls to come get the water, but partly because if there's no private sanitation systems or services for the girls, it's dangerous for them to be at school at all. So, but it's in many communities in Canada, remote communities, First Nations communities, it's also a women's issue, and it's certainly a human rights issue. So much has happened since that, like 2008 film, that's, 17 years ago. I'm going to start with some of the good stuff. There is a little bad stuff, actually a lot of bad stuff, but a lot of good stuff. The most important thing I think to tell about the story generally is that we were working towards getting the United Nations to recognize the human rights to water and sanitation, which happened on July 28th, 2010. I was advising the UN at the time, the General Assembly, and we put the question to the floor. The government of Canada at the time was Stephen Harper's government, and they voted, they abstained. They were opposed to it, but they didn't have the guts to vote against it. But still, they gave me no end of grief opposing something that is just such a motherhood. I mean, how could anybody be against the human right to water? And we now have close to 50 countries in the world that have either amended their constitution or brought in new legislation to provide for the human right to water. We here in Canada have fought and held off privatization of water services. That was a big part of the Harper agenda. We've stopped it. They've stopped it or reversed it in many places. We started a project called Blue Communities, where municipalities, starting in Canada but around the world now, pledge not to allow their water to become privatized and to keep it as a public trust. And also, if there's clean water coming out of the taps, not to provide bottled water, to try to deal with the plastics issue. We now have many cities like Montreal, Vancouver, London in Canada, Paris, Berlin, Brussels, many, many countries, cities in countries around the world now that have taken this pledge. So we have fought back using the human right to water, and that's been really, really important. In Canada, again, the Harper government undid a whole lot of good legislation. The Fisheries Act, they gutted and so on. They cut funding to the Great Lakes. When the Trudeau government came in, they pledged to end long-term boil water advisories in First Nations communities. That's not done yet, but they certainly started it. And I want to say, we need to, when we ask for something and somebody does it, we need to recognize that has happened in some serious way. They reversed the Fisheries Act and made it better. They brought in a new Canadian Environmental Act, Protection Act. They reversed the cancellation of the funding to the Great Lakes restoration and so on. They set up something called the Canada Water Agency. So we're beginning to work now with government that seems to recognize that there is a crisis and that we need to protect our water. We in Canada, I call it the myth of abundance. We seem to think that we have so much water. It's in our history, it's in our music, it's in our souls, right? It's in our literature. But actually, if you look at the way we've cared for it, not really. It's just sort of a myth that we think that we love it, but if you love something, you care for it, and we really have to start taking better care of it. Other really good news is that we're starting to see this process of the rights of rivers, the rights of lakes, the rights of waterways. It's part of the rights of nature movement, which I've been very involved in. And this is very old, of course, but very new again, in that we're trying to bring in new legislation, new laws, new way of seeing laws that say that humans are not the top of the chain, and the legislations we have generally just says this is how much pollution you can pour into a waterway, instead of saying you can't do it at all because the rivers don't have any rights. And the first river with rights in Canada is the Magpie. It's a mighty river in northern Quebec. And the local Innu people are the guardians of this river that now has 9 rights. They include the right to regenerate, the right to flow, the right to a healthy environment around it. But my favorite is number 9 of the 9 rights. The river has the right to sue. If governments come in and destroy it through a major dam or whatever, or pollution, or corporations come in and pollute it. And we're beginning to see the movements of there's a movement for the Athabasca. There's a movement to make Lake Winnipeg, give Winnipeg human rights, basically legal rights, similar to human rights. The St. Lawrence River, the Gatineau, which is near where I come from. I come from the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin people in Ottawa. So there are many, many places in this country as well as around the world that are now saying, we're not waiting for governments. They're not acting properly. They're not acting fast enough. We have to do it from the ground up. So there are many, many exciting things happening. The bad news is that we are a planet running out of clean water. We have not cared for our water. We've seen it as a resource for our pleasure, industrial growth, and profit. And we haven't seen it as the thing that gives us life, that we have to see ourselves as part of and we have to be stewards of. We have not seen water that way. And this is a real and serious problem. I don't want to be too negative here, but I do need to say that the UN says that within the next decade, the demand for water will outstrip supply by about 40%, which is just a stunning statistic if you think of it. Already there are so many people in trouble. At a very conservative estimate, a quarter of the population of the world doesn't have access to clean water on a daily basis, and half the population of the world doesn't have sanitation, proper access to sanitation. And that's in spite of all the work that we've done with the human right to water and so on, and we have been progressing there. You may have the human right to water, but if there's no clean water there to access, if all the groundwater's been polluted or brought up for industrial agriculture or polluted with mining tailings or whatever, it's not a very real right, is it? I mean, that's not quite the same thing. So this notion of having to protect water and the human right to water together to protect the rights of water is really incredibly important. So we have our work cut out for us. And here in Canada, 70%, as we speak, 70%, over 70% of Canada is in drought, much of it in very serious drought. We've had the second worst wildfire season on record. And if we think we can be cavalier with water, and I'm warning us, this move to make Canada an energy superpower and to bring in AI, artificial intelligence, and all sorts of databases and new mining and new pipelines, this is going to impact water. And we don't have an excess of water. You'll read that we have 20% of the world's fresh water, but that's only true if you pull up every river and every lake and all our groundwater, then we're all dry. No, we have about 7% of the available fresh water. That's the water you can use without destroying the source. So I want to say that we have to be hopeful. Our job is to be hopeful for the next generation and generations. I have grandchildren growing up, adult grandchildren, young adult grandchildren who are fabulous, and I love them, and I love that generation so much, and I'm very hopeful about them. So I would leave you with what I call a word of wise hope. Wise hope isn't Pollyanna-ish, everything's going to be fine, which has a lot in common with pessimism, because everything's going to be terrible, everything's going to be fine, you don't have to do anything, right? Wise hope says, yeah, you look the thing in the eye and you don't deny the seriousness, and you learn as much as you can about it, but then you still do something. You take action. You put your hand out and touch the world in a place where you feel you could make a difference. And you have to have faith, and this is really important, that there are others doing the same thing. That's really, really important. We have the gift of life. We have the ability as women to phenomenally and fundamentally change the world. And committing to becoming stewards of water, to becoming guardians, defenders of water is extraordinarily important if we and the planet and future generations are to survive. So I send you love, and I thank you very much for watching the film and for inviting me to participate in this way. I wish I could be with you in person, but you're all scattered all over the place, so that would be hard. But I send love and thanks to Suzanne and Pat and all of you, and I wish you well, and I wish you hope.